The Woke. Censors. Jeeves and Wooster. Hello, I'm H.G. Tudor. I have warned you previously about the way that certain narcissists, harnessing the herd mentality, ensure that a particular narrative is driven down your throat. With those that are more right-leaning, there is a brutal honesty with regard to their attempts to control the narrative, which is essentially, we know what's right for you, and this is in the best interests of everybody, so swallow your medicine and get on with it. Those that are of the left-leaning persuasion do it with the belief that I actually am a kind person, and that I am empathic, and it's appropriate for me to say all of these things and make these changes because I am right, because I care. In a way, that is a more dishonest approach, because invariably those on the right don't make a pretension of actually caring, but saying, look, this is the way it has to be for the greater good. Or, I'm the one that's in charge, you have to do what I say because I'm the one that's in charge. Either way, there are invariably narcissists amongst those groupings who, as a consequence, as you know, of their pursuit of the prime aims, need to control you, need to assert that control over you by telling you what you can and cannot do. Amongst the woke, this revolves around many revisions of history. It revolves around assuming that you can't cope with a certain form of language just because they can't. You see, the way that their narcissism functions, and it infects non-narcissists that follow them, is essentially that narcissism decides to latch on to a particular perspective of the world, which is, we mustn't offend people, we must be inclusive, we must ensure that everybody, where they're a minority, they're no longer oppressed and they're catered for. Of course, the selectiveness of the narcissism is such that what it does is that when it claims to support the oppressed and the downtrodden, it then oppresses other people and treads down on them. They are allowed to speak their truth. You are not allowed to speak yours. They are allowed to voice their opinion. You are not allowed to voice yours because it disagrees with them. And accordingly, you are subjected to a barrage of prescriptive notions that if you don't agree with it, it means that you're a bad person, that if you don't subscribe to those ideas, then there's something that's wrong with you. Those particular narcissists, where their narcissism has opted to utilize this approach to life, then find that if, for instance, someone was to use the term blackboard, namely something that a school teacher once upon a time wrote upon, that is deemed offensive. It also means many of these woke narcissists engage in behaviours. For instance, in the United Kingdom, they might see a street name which says Black Boy Lane, and they automatically assume it's racist. This is because they're not prepared to delve into the actual evidence and look at the origins of this name. And many of the names which have black in the name are nothing to do with race and everything to do with culture. For example, Black Boy is invariably about young children who were chimney sweeps that were sent up into the chimneys to clean them and emerged covered in soot, and therefore they were coloured black. And they were a black boy, because it was mainly young boys that would do this. And that's where the origin of the Black Boy Lane comes from. Nothing to do with someone who is Afro-Caribbean, and everything to do with the fact that they were covered in soot. But of course, along comes some clown and says, you can't have a street called Black Boy Lane, that's racist. The colour black isn't racist. We have black cars. We have black grills. We have black telephones. We have black desks. As I am talking to you now, I'm talking to you through a black microphone. The colour black of itself isn't racist, it's a description. Same as the colour red, or green, or yellow. To refer to somebody as black isn't racist. To use the term black boy isn't racist. But you will see, of course, rather than actually look at the origins of words and phrases and what they actually mean, these individuals come along and adopt a one-size-fits-all approach as a means of asserting control over you. They wish to censor, get rid of that street name, you can't have it. Indeed, I believe in London, as a consequence of attempts to change the name of a street which had been there for decades and turn it into something else, the local council found that somebody created a sign in the original name, and I think it might be Black Boy Lane, and put it back up there. People resisting this idiocy. Of course, with many of these prescriptive narcissists, they can't allow people to make choices themselves, because that would be too dangerous. To assume that people have the intelligence to work things out for themselves would be a threat to control. But they're at it again, and this time is a consequence of censoring P.G. Woodhouse's, Jeeves's novels for unacceptable language. Time and time again, these wokists, be they narcissists or the ones that follow them, can't grasp this simple fact. Just because there is language of its time in a publication doesn't mean you need to change it. If you find a book offensive, stop reading, put it to one side. Or you can think to yourself, that language doesn't sit comfortably with me today, but it doesn't matter, because I recognise it as of its time. How interesting for me to at least be given insight into the way that people spoke. If you wish, you can look down on them and think, isn't it terrible how unenlightened they were? But what you mustn't do is change that original work. It was created by somebody else. It gives you insight, not only into the way that they operated, but also of the way that the book was written at the time. Who do you think you are to come along and tamper with such an original work? Ah, yes, a woke narcissist who shows no sense of boundary recognition, no ability to contain themselves, acting with a sense of entitlement to trample all over somebody's work. If you do not like it, you do not need to read it, listen to it, purchase it. Indeed, as we have seen, those that have taken exception to the involvement of Dylan Mulvaney with Bud Light have voted with their drinking and have said, I am no longer buying that, resulting in a $5 billion loss for Anheuser-Busch in relation to their stock price. But these individuals, because it's a threat to their control, and remember, it's not always narcissists that do this, but the genesis is with the narcissist and others that follow, that they deem we must change that language. You can't say that anymore. But who are they to be the arbiters of what is allowed to be said? The simple stance should be this. That's the way that it's written. Let it be. You can learn from that, be educated from it, and if you don't like it, you can say that you don't like it, but you're not allowed to change it. You don't have to go back and read it. If there's a television program based upon it and you don't like the language, don't watch it. Turn off. It offends your little namby-pamby ears so much. If there's a film containing something which you find offensive, you can leave the cinema. Nobody's keeping you there. It's not a Clockwork Orange. And accordingly, in the latest censorious assault on English literature, P.G. Woodhouse's celebrated comic Jeeves and Wooster novels have reportedly been rewritten by publishers to remove unacceptable passages and prose. Once again, the hypocrisy looms large of, I'm allowed to do this to other people's works, but you're not allowed to express your opinion. We, of course, had the row over the decision to issue censored copies of the children's books of Roald Dahl, See Parts Pass Him, to confirm, or rather to conform with these modern woke sensibilities. And now, P.G. Woodhouse has become the next target for failing to align with a politically correct code of current publishers. According to a report from The Telegraph, several Woodhouse novels featuring the famed character Jeeves, the gentleman's personal gentleman character, which inspired the Ask Jeeves search engine website, have had their prose changed or outright removed for new editions set to be published by Penguin Random House. There's even a bastard trigger warning at the beginning of the 2023 edition of Thank You Jeeves, which states, please be aware that this book was published in the 1930s and contains language, themes and characterizations which you may find outdated. In the present edition, we have sought to edit minimally words that we regard as unacceptable to present-day readers. How dare you? First of all, Are you that cretinous that you can't comprehend that a book that you pick up might just contain language and prose that is outdated to you, but maybe not outdated to others, but that your teeny-weeny mind can't cope with it? Oh dear, are you really made of such flimsy stuff that you haven't got the backbone to cope with literature? I can appreciate that somebody who has suffered a particular trauma, if they are then dunked in that trauma again, orally, visually, by having to watch something akin to what they've experienced, that can have an impact. But you're offended by language used in a book relating to a time in which you never lived. How does that work? No, quite simply, those are attention-seeking professional victims who go, "Ooh, I'm triggered by the use of this language." How? It isn't about you. It isn't about a time in which you lived. But what you're doing is playing the victim. And in all likelihood, this is the behaviour of these particular woke narcissists. The Censors also targeted the 2022 edition of Right Ho, Jeeves, which is tagged with the same trigger warning. In addition, the comedic novel had a racial phrase to describe a minstrel of the old school, purged from the book. According to the British broadsheet, racial terms have been removed from multiple Woodhouse novels. I can well imagine that the majority of individuals who are of colour wouldn't give a flying fuck about the content of these books and would recognise, yes, this was the way that it was used back then. It was a different time. Thank goodness that we don't use these terms any longer, but it's a useful reminder of understanding the way that people behaved. Penguin went on to reportedly remove numerous racial references from Thank You, Jeeves, the first full-length novel in the Jeeves and Wooster series, which centres around the performance of a minstrel troupe, which was a common feature of England during the era in which the novel was set. Woodhouse, born in 1881 in Surrey, England, wrote over 90 books during his lifetime and was hailed as Britain's premier comedic writer. His works inspired many adaptations, including the heralded 1990 series Jeeves and Wooster, starring Stephen Fry and Hugh Laurie. The works of Woodhouse, which often play with the language of pre-World War I Edwardian England in conjunction with slang from America, have been held up as some of the finest examples of comedic prose in the English language, with the Code of the Woosters writer often being compared to other literary giants such as Jane Austen and William Shakespeare. So imagine that there you have, embodied in literature, brilliant examples of pre-World War I Edwardian England. Do you know anybody that speaks in such terms? No, because they're dead. They don't exist any longer, anybody that was able to speak in pre-World War I Edwardian England. They're pushing up daisies. Yet here you have that alongside the contemporary slang from America, embodied in a work of literature. And you, the woke narcissists, want to expunge this, removing such access to historical information. A contemporary of Woodhouse's, Brideshead Revisited author Evelyn Waugh, remarked in 1961, "For Mr. Woodhouse there has been no fall of man, no aboriginal calamity. His characters have never tasted the forbidden fruit. They are still in Eden. The gardens of Blandings Castle are that original garden from which we are all exiled. The chef prepares the ambrosia for the immortals of high Olympus. Mr. Woodhouse's world can never stale. He will continue to release future generations from captivity that may be more irksome than our own. He has made a world for us to live in and delight in." Douglas Adams, the author of The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy series, said of Woodhouse, "It matters not what he writes, endless variations on the theme of pig kidnappings, lofty butlers and ludicrous impostures. He is the greatest musician of the English language, and exploring variations of familiar material is what musicians do all day." Two testaments there to the ability of this author. But once again, we have those individuals, the loud-mouthed minorities of which I've spoken, coming along and trying to impose their control, their weakling sensibilities on you. I'm H.G. Tudor. Thank you for listening.